and we're going to kick off our webinar today, Advancing Pharmaceutical Quality, What's New, What's Next? My name is Catherine Batten, and I'm from the ISP Boston office, and I'd like to thank our meeting managers today, Heather Longden and Charlie Maher. First off, I'd like to thank our program sponsors, DPS, Genesis, ICQ Consultants, and Massey Bioservices. Next, some information on how to participate in today's event. You'll have the opportunity to submit your questions by typing your questions into the Q&A session on Pigeonhole. And a link to the Pigeonhole platform was in your confirmation email, and we're also going to list that in the chat box. You could see the passcode here, and again, that will be part of the link. There you can enter your questions, and you can also upvote questions that other attendees have posted, and we'll be addressing those at the end of the presentation. On behalf of the EPC, I'd like to encourage everybody to get involved. The EPC meets the first Wednesday of every month at 5:30 via Zoom, and we're always looking for new volunteers. It's really a great way to expand your network and to liaise with some of the best professionals in the industry. We encourage you to continue the conversation over on the chapter's social media platforms listed here. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists today. We have Nuala Calnan, who's the CEO of BioPharm Excel and has over 20 years experience in the biopharmaceutical industry across operations, new product introduction, and facility startup and manufacturing. Nuala's current focus is on the integration of knowledge excellence, operational excellence, and cultural excellence in delivering enhanced quality outcomes for the patient. Tammy Frederick is Senior Director of Corporate Quality Systems and Cultural Excellence at Perrigo. She's the chair of ISP's Advancing Pharmaceutical Quality team. Tammy is a co-author of the 2020 Ispe APQ series, Quality Management Maturity CAPA Guide. Thomas Friedli is the director of the Institute of Technology Management at St. Gallen University, and he's also a professor for production management at St. Gallen University in Switzerland. His main research interests are in the fields of managing operational excellence, global production management, and management of industrial services. And lastly, we have Alex Viehmann, who is the director of the Division of Quality Intelligence 2 at the FDA and the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality. And with that, please join me in welcoming today's speakers. And I think, Tammy, you're up first, so you can start sharing your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. There we go. Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. Hi, my name is Tammy Frederick, and again, I have responsibility for corporate quality systems for Perrigo, but I'm also the ISPE chair of our Advancing Pharmaceutical Quality Program. And this is a quality management maturity program, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about it. We're very excited to be bringing this and publishing this. We started this last month with some publications, and we have some future publications coming as well. So really, we started the APQ program within ISPE based out of the state, really understanding the state of pharmaceutical quality in industry. It's an industry for industry program, really focused out of FDA's 21st century vision. And again, we've all seen this vision from Dr. Woodcock and have really aligned an industry for industry program based on this to really drive and help industry to improve in each of the areas of quality management maturity for themselves. So I'll show you a little bit about the APQ program. It is, again, an industry-led program. We have a group of expert volunteers that have tied together and really helped to leverage industry expertise and really helping to improve the continuous supply of quality medicines to patients by building an improvement program. And this is based upon the ICH Q10 framework. is fully aligned within operational excellence and quality excellence and quality cultural excellence. We have guides that we are developing and providing through ISPE. There are a set of maturity assessments. Within this, there also are KPIs and metrics that we provide for each of the ICHQ-10 elements. And then we also show a list of continuous improvement tools for each level of maturity so that you don't just assess your program, you can actually aspire and work toward improvement in each of these areas. And then it's complementary to many of the different aspects and programs that have been provided within FDA. And FDA has been a part of the review of these, this guide series as well. Again, the goals of our program are to support and incentivize sustained continual improvement for a firm's pharmaceutical quality system. And it provides an opportunity for benchmarking. So you can not only benchmark across your own sites within a company, but also benchmark from company to company should you choose. It's a way to share best practices and also accelerate progress and improvement. For patients, again, this really helps to increase the reliability of supply of those quality products. And then for our health agencies, really, shows the focus of current expectations, critical quality areas, and again, advancing pharmaceutical quality. So a little bit of the journey. It's been several years that we've been engaging and working with FDA and understanding not only we started out of the quality metrics program with FDA and have been very engaged in not only understanding the guidance documents that have came through, but also providing feedback in that, participating in many of the different programs and pilots alongside with FDA, and then collaborating within industry on what are our learnings, how can we help one another, how can we support improving pharmaceutical quality. And in the 2019 year, we really started to move from reacting to what are some of the expectations of the health authorities to say, let's take control of this ourselves and actually help ourselves. And so we initiated out of that quality metrics program an advancing pharmaceutical program, or advancing pharmaceutical quality program. Excuse me. And in this, really have worked together and combined a really solid platform and a really good program for measuring quality management maturity across industry to understand that and really build that within the plan. So what is APQ? APQ is a framework, again, that is based upon ICHQ-10 elements. It is a quality management maturity program. It involves a cyclical path. And we really wanted to build this in a cycle because we always have opportunities for improvement. And so within this, we have an assessment model where you can see where baseline, where are you at? We have an aspire, a way to understand from that maturity, where do I have opportunities for improvement? We can act. We can really drive improvement in those areas, not only through measurements, but also through enablers and behaviors that we can measure. And then advance, really move toward continual improvement and drive improvement in core areas. And so you'll see in the center of this diagram in the orange is really how we are building out this plan. And the assess, aspire, act, and advance is a very detailed assessment process. We get down into the weeds or into the details of each of the ICHQ-10 elements. What we have found as we built this and as we piloted it with industry is that many different companies have different levels of maturity for each of the different ICHQ-10 elements. And we've partnered and worked with St. Gallen's University, and really pleased that Dr. Thomas Friedli is online as well as with Dr. Nuala Calnan, who is online as well too, to build in a pre and a post assessment to this process, looking at a little higher level to baseline, kind of where you're at. And that helps to understand, wow, I'm doing really great with my management responsibilities and review, but maybe I'm not not as high on a kappa element. And so that would help you to understand, oh, wow, at a high level in understanding this, I have the opportunity to improve in kappa. And then you could really dig into that assess, aspire, act, and advance within the kappa elements, or you could do it for all of the elements. That's the great thing about this program and the way that it's built. Further, this pre-assessment, we provide the tools and the opportunity for you to utilize this yourself and to do it within your own company. Or we also provide the linkage to do this with the St. Gallen's University team, who are really structured and based in operational excellence, who understand how to assess that information, but can also benchmark you and help you to understand where do you benchmark and fit against other companies as well. So you can see not only how you are fitting and maybe your different sites, but also how do you fit within all of industry. So it's a really comprehensive program and built so that you can understand all aspects of your pharmaceutical quality system and looking both at measures, key performance measures, as well as key enablers and those behaviors that tie in with the culture of quality within your organization. So we've built the program, as I had indicated, on the ICH Q10 framework. And within this, there are 4 core areas that we are building guides through ISPE. The first is corrective and preventive actions. And we've completed this guide. It is published and it is available on the ISPE website. We are in the process of completing this year the management responsibilities and management review, as well as the change management system guides. Both of these are completed. We've piloted the MMR guide, the management responsibilities and review guide, the change management guide. We're just moving into a pilot phase with that right now, testing that in industry, and we should have publications on these toward the end of 2021 or early 2022. And then we're finishing also, we're just kicking off the process performance and product quality monitoring guide. And the great part about this guide is it should be pretty quick because we do have a PQLI series within ISPE where an expert team has already developed and built some really good tools. So a piece of what we were looking for in this, that advanced piece, is already done for us. We can tie that into this overall guide. What we really need to build with that is the assess and aspire piece, really understanding how do you measure that, how do you assess where you're at, and then also what are those measures, those measures and behavioral analysis that you can build in that we can use these tools for. I also want to emphasize, and I'm sure Nuala will do the same, is the Cultural Excellence Report that was written in 2017. Nuala and I are both co-authors of this excellent report, and I will say it's a prime opportunity for everyone to go out and really assess and see where you are at with your quality, your cultural excellence as it relates to quality. We have 6 dimensions of culture that we have assessed and built into this model. It is a full assessment. We do provide tools. We do provide improvement opportunities and enablers within this guide as well. So I strongly encourage that. Everything we've built for APQ is built on that foundation of cultural excellence as well as operational excellence. So what is involved in the ISPE guides? What will you get when you actually open up this guide? You're going to see there, again, there are 4 core guides that are built in this program. It will tell you the full background of the APQ program, kind of where we were, how we built it, why it's important, and how the different elements fit together. It'll provide you an overview and a structure of the APQ framework, similar to what I just showed you here a minute ago. It'll tell you how, and actually walks you through how to provide that quantitative pre and post assessment, that guide that we've really built into the program that was developed by St. Gallen's University. And really that guide was very strongly part of the Dun & Bradstreet benchmarking work with FDA. And so it really has some real core elements in there, again, based on ICH Q10 that are very helpful for process performance, as well as understanding enablers and understanding behaviors and how people act upon things. It also then conducts and helps you provide a deep dive, assess and aspire exercise for each of the ICH-Q10 elements, and then also shows you how to set up your ACT and advance improvement program so that you can understand maturity for each of these elements within your organization. You can aspire to improve, you can act upon those, and then advance with improvement. And we also, at the end, we show you a worked example. So it's not just here's how to do it, but we're actually going to show you how it is done within a worked example in a case study. I provided some examples in here of kind of what it looks like. And so within here, you will see, and this is an example of the guide that has just been published here in January. We show 5 different levels of maturity for each element. Within each element, so for Kappa, when you look at the assessment, there are 7 different aspects that we are actually sub-elements that we provide very clear and very distinct guidance on how you would fit within the maturity assessment and how you would fill out this process. So it shows you here how you would really truly look at for Kappa effectiveness, how would I manage and fit within this framework? And then we also propose that you utilize, on the right-hand side of the guide, you're going to see demonstrated evidence. We ask you to provide demonstrated evidence for that as well, for your own help and support. And then also, to make sure that you can, I think I'm a 3, but I might be moving into a 4. Show that demonstrated evidence of the 2, and you can absolutely mark yourself as a 3.5. So it's a good way of understanding where you're at and assessing where you are at from a maturity perspective. We provide a tool guide that is built out and broken down by each of the maturity aspects that help you to advance from one level to the next, some tools that you can use. And then we also really talk about our supporting materials that we have available as well. And one is this cultural excellence report that I mentioned earlier. It's a valuable report. I strongly recommend everyone taking a look at that cultural excellence report. We also provided a collaboration between ISPE and PDA. We've worked very closely with PDA on developing a root cause analysis tool. And that root cause analysis tool really helps you to get down to the core root cause, not just that surface, what you think is a cause, but how do you build down to that root cause? And what are some very specific tools that you can use at different levels of maturity in an organization? And then we also will have a webinar upcoming, and Nuala will tell you a little more about that, where we will be talking about some rewards and recognition programs that can be built out for cultural excellence. And within this, you're going to see there is, again, a maturity assessment process. We have that guide, and we actually have some great tools for Gemba. Gemba is go to where the work is. Some really good opportunities and little checklists that you can use and evaluate as you are going out and going to where the work is in your areas, the right questions to ask and the right things to do, behaviors you can have as a leader versus things that you probably shouldn't do. So we provide that guidance in there as well. All of our APQ reviews have been provided and reviewed by industry. They've been piloted by many different companies in industry. That feedback was brought back into the program and assessed, and we updated the guide to make sure that it really is something that will work for industry, that it's not just people in a room trying to put some ideas together, but it actually is a program that is applicable, that teams can really find value in and use and help themselves to improve. We also had academia review and then also health authority review, both by the FDA as well as by the MHRA, so that we can understand too from where moving forward in that continuous improvement cycle, making sure that we are looking at this comprehensively. So I want to thank the Advancing Pharmaceutical Quality core team members. We have a wonderful group of volunteers that have just been phenomenal at really taking their time and resource to help us to develop this great guide series that can really help industry and help us not only to assess, but to aspire for improvement, to act on that, and then to advance toward improvement. So if there are any questions with this, please put those in the chat function today or in the Pigeonhole guide, and we'll be happy to answer your questions here at the end of the session. All right, thank you very much. With that, I will turn it over to Alex. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Tammy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Let me share my screen here. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see my screen okay, and good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are today. Thank you for having me. My name is Alex Viehmann. I'm currently a division director in the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality. Within the division that I manage, we handle post-market quality defect reporting programs, so field alert reports, VPDRs, et cetera, as well as the drug quality sampling and testing. I'm also, based upon my background, why is this going? Okay, based upon my background as an economist and statistician, I lead a lot of the analytical strategies when it comes to data management and more of the innovative technologies for how we're going to do post-market surveillance. So application of natural language processing when it comes to assessment of defect reporting, when it comes to more enterprise level oversight of the inspection reporting program and how we can utilize those data to really make better data-driven decisions. But the reason I'm here with you today is that to speak around updating you on FDA CDER's quality metrics and quality management maturity programs. So a little bit of history around why I am here speaking with you. So I've been involved with quality metrics going back to 2013-14, right after the original FRN was published when drug shortages started picking up, and CDER published the Federal Register notice asking for what can we do to be more proactive. And we heard a lot of comments around, well, you can use KPIs, quality metrics, to really build that more proactive state versus reactive. So I was involved in both guidance, developing both guidances, many interactions with industry and academia through conferences, good working relationship with ISPE and Tammy and her team through some of the programs that they're running. I've worked with Professor Friedli for the past few years on a lot of research in these areas, because what we did here through the original publication of these guidances, one of the things was, what data do you have to support that these are the right metrics? And so today I'm going to kind of speak to you around where we are today, what we've learned, where we're going, and what to expect. So pharmaceutical quality, just to get everyone up to speed, quality product of any kind is something that consistently meets the expectations of the user. And drugs are no different, right? When we're talking about cell phones, cars, right? You expect requirements, right? And same thing with drugs. So patients expect safe and effective medicine with every dose that they take. And pharmaceutical quality is consistently meeting standards that ensure every dose is safe and effective and free of contamination and defects, and really gives patients confidence in their next dose of medicine. So an outline of the presentation, I'm going to talk around the office that I work in and how our role fits into metrics and maturity. Going into our quality metrics program, what have we done recently? What are some learnings? Some recent work around a quality benchmarking study that we coordinated with Dun & Bradstreet, as well as St. Gallen, who you're also going to hear a little bit more about from Professor Friedli. And then around how this evolution of quality management maturity. So moving forward, our office is located within a super office called the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality. And our current director is Jennifer McGuire. Really here, this is really a strategic plan to show you how maturity and metrics fit into our office's remit when it comes to building strategic partnerships to promote pharmaceutical quality, really strengthening strengthening our organizational foundation to achieve comprehensive surveillance. Because when it comes to comprehensive surveillance, right, and I'll get into this a little bit later, right now we have a big gap, right, when it comes to the information that the FDA knows about facilities right now is very focused on negative things, right? We know when there are 483s. We know when there are recalls, field alert reports, et cetera, right? But to have effective surveillance strategies and to really promote some of the things that we're talking about, you know, regulatory flexibility, et cetera, we need to start achieving more data and information when companies are doing things well, when they have mature processes in place, right? Because our current business models don't facilitate that, right? We are very good at documenting when people do things bad and supporting that through evidence, et cetera. So that's really when metrics started, right? It was kind of to fill that void, right? You know, can we get better information around and data? So when we have to make surveillance decisions around inspection frequency, when we also have to make pre-approval decisions around PAI inspections, when it comes to signals that we're seeing through the post-market space and how we design sampling programs, et cetera, right? Right now, it's very, you know, the data we use, and I can tell you, right, and the analytics are focused on some of these, the negative things, and we really are trying to fill that gap. So our office right now really is responsible for monitoring quality and information around CDER regulated sites and products. You know, you've probably seen numbers around our inventory when it comes to, you know, there's roughly 4,000 non-medical gas facilities in our inventory. There's good parity between foreign and domestic, but it just shows, you know, the level, the diversity of the inventory that we're dealing with, number one, and how global it has become. And really, our organization is responsible for taking in the information that we have around facilities and products and using analytics and using data to drive decisions around frequency and prioritization for surveillance GMP inspections. Sampling programs, right? Well, what products are we going to sample? You know, how are we going to design this? Site engagement, which sites do we need to engage for engagement programs? And then quantitating the state of quality, right? So I'm not sure how aware everyone else is on this call, but OPQ publishes a report every year on the state of pharmaceutical quality. And what you can see within that, right, is there's a lot of distributions of where the market is, where we're seeing, you know, when it comes to inspection scores, and we've created a program that kind of quantifies that on a scale of 1 through 10, you know, inspection scoring, and really looking at the difference between that. So again, that's where, I don't know why I'm sorry, everybody, this is going, I'm not clicking anything and it keeps moving on me. So really, when we talk about metrics and QMM, right, and quantitating the state of quality, we want to get into that space, right? We want to start modernizing the way we do oversight and accounting for you know, mature programs and when people do things well. We use a lot of machine learning applications now and predictive analytics, natural language processing to proactively identify signals and trends, right, in anticipation before, you know, serious quality problems occur. And again, you know, continuously, you know, we're always looking into research and seeing how other industries are doing things, you know, when it comes to the financial industry, retail industry, right? How do other people surveil? And how can we kind of directly take in some of those concepts and methodologies into the way the FDA can surveil a very global and diverse network? So now into quality metrics and where we are. So again, this is very recent. You know, the quality metrics program, obviously the first draft guidance was published in 2015, and then a revised draft guidance 18 months later. And really, it got us to the site visit and feedback program, right? One of the consistent things that we've heard through those dockets and through the conferences with ISPE, PDA, et cetera, was, you know, number one, FDA, you know, do you have data to support some of these metrics that you're choosing, right? And you're picking a handful of metrics, but you're saying it's going to, you know, solve X, Y, and Z, right? And where are we and how is it going to do that? And really, we would like a seat at the table, right? That's what we consistently heard. We'd like a seat at the table to talk to you, FDA, around our programs, right? How we manage data, to show you how the way that you've designed it may not facilitate what you're trying to do, right? It may not provide you the best information that you want. There's, when it comes to gaming, when it comes to definitions, when it comes to, burden and infrastructure and the architecture and how data are managed. We really heard that consistently through the docket. So what we did was we stood up a site visit program and a feedback program. And really, the site visit program was intended for 1 to 2 day on-site opportunities for FDA to engage with that particular facility, better understand how the data are managed, right? How the different communication strategies work using quality metrics data. Again, it keeps doing this. I apologize. I don't know what. Let me go back. I hope it's okay if I just keep it here, because I hate that it keeps jumping back and forth. So really, it was more about an on-site opportunity for FDA to engage with these companies, better understand the data management structure, better understand how metrics are used to drive decision-making, and really how the company, from a cultural perspective, uses and enables staff through metrics and through these other programs. And then the feedback program was stood up in parallel, kind of to work with companies on more of a series kind of perspective, right? Have multiple meetings, share data. That was one of the biggest things, because what we weren't able to obtain is the real live data exchanges on the site visit program that would really teach us, right? And I can tell you, I've been involved in a lot of these. When it comes to, okay, FDA, the way you've defined certain things do not work for us. Well, the feedback program really was a way for us to learn that, right? Companies were able to submit data according to, okay, FDA, if we defined it the way you've defined it, here's how our numbers would look, versus here's why we think you should define it this way, or here's why this metric doesn't work for our company. It was very good, robust discussions around the right metrics, and it provided us with data-driven evidence around why, I'll get into this in the next few slides, how our program needs to change, right? How the metrics program needs to change, because what we've learned through directly interacting with companies and sharing data is that the way we design the program and define the program, there needs to be change. So what did we learn from these site visit and feedback program? So the original guidance really started talking about product level reporting. So reporting data to product level, segmented by site. What we've learned through both the site visit and feedback program consistently, and we also heard this through the docket, and it was supported through data, right, is that site level reporting is preferred, much preferred, right, from a business perspective, from the way the data are managed, and from just the decision-making process perspective. We did have a few sites, based on how their company was vertically integrated, they would prefer product, but from a vast majority, what we consistently heard is site level reporting is preferred, and it also makes more sense. That's another thing. So what we also heard is that one size fits all may not be feasible, that having the same metrics across such a diverse industry, it might not be attainable, and it might not be the best approach. Is that different industry sectors, sites that manage OTC products versus large molecules, small molecules, right? There's a lot of variability and a lot of different data that showed us how metrics are used differently and how different metrics are utilized within each one of these appropriate segments. Cross-sectional analyses from a comparison perspective, even if you try to compare apples to apples as best you can, is probably not the best idea, right? Because that would take a lot of additional context, and the FDA would not have that context. And that metrics from a regulatory program perspective should really be used to monitor performance over time, not to compare Alex versus Tammy versus Professor Friedli, right? How does metric X look for Alex versus Tammy versus, oh, Alex is significantly worse, he's having a problem, right? The numbers alone can be manipulative, and without additional context, it really is more appropriate to look at the data from a longitudinal perspective, time series. some of the definitions we provided in the guidance mathematically provided problems, right? When we were sharing data, we were coming up with trying to divide by 0, right? Or having lot acceptance rates at 700%. And it's because of the way we defined it in the original guidance. And we recognized that, and it was great to work with a lot of companies to show us, hey, FDA, if we submitted data based upon the way that you have defined it, here's how it would look. And what we found out is that mathematically, it just wouldn't make sense from a data ingestion perspective. When we would ingest this information, what are we going to do with dividing things by 0? So that was great. Continuing, right? Some of the metrics we laid out in the guidance: lot acceptance rate, invalidated OOS rate. Although they're routinely monitored by companies, what we also saw through the data is they're not discerning at all. There's very low variability, right? And again, right, it's hard to say can we extrapolate to the rest of the population from a sample size of whatever the feedback program was. That's a fair question. But what we did consistently see is that these metrics are not discerning. That if you look at the data through time, right, you see very little variability. And when you're trying to collect data to drive decision-making processes, to drive decision-making and really be more risk-based and data-driven, right, having things that are static, that don't change with no variability is little value, right? So again, trying to better understand what are the appropriate metrics that will enable the FDA and enable continual improvement within the industry, that don't just sit at the same number, which it prevents both of those things. Pqs effectiveness is also a very critical component of metrics programs. And again, how you define Pqs effectiveness, you have the ICH Q10 framework, but there are many different examples of KPIs that were submitted through this program that really companies used as a surrogate when it comes to data around their Kappa program, repeat deviations, human error, timeliness, on time and full. There was a vast majority of different things related to Pqs effectiveness that companies were submitting and advocating that these are good indicators to be used. That statistical quality control, when it comes to use of SPC, process capability, machine learning, natural language processing, are all viable strategies to assess industry submitted data, right? And also that what we also learned from a lot of companies is that they're deploying these type of strategies and these type of technologies to have better oversight over data related to these types of metrics. And so really those were great conversations to kind of share how we were envisioning using these type of tools to monitor data and use to assess. We also got a lot of feedback around the portal that was designed, the CDER Next Gen portal that was designed for the transaction of data. And again, this is the same portal that from drug shortage perspective, from Type C meeting, et cetera, that's used, the CDER Next Gen. But we were not in production. We were in a test environment, pre-prod. That was not rolled out to production, which caused some issues in itself when it comes to data integration and linking supply chain. But some of the things that we've heard through this was, the process, the uniform process for how you would use it to submit application data versus non-application data was not ideal, right? And we got a lot of good feedback there. That when there are changes made to the portal, and when you need help with troubleshooting and answering questions, that process needs to be more clear. Obviously, one of the biggest things we've heard is we want less steps and mouse clicks and data entry points when it comes to, if we're going to be routinely submitting metrics, right, there needs to be a straight business to government transaction, right, where you can direct upload certain files, as opposed to going in there one by one. Okay, I'm going to submit input 1 for product 1, input 2 for product 1, and vice versa. Some of these companies that were managing hundreds of products, it would take them all, it could potentially take them all day to go through one by one. And so we recognized that early on into the process that, that this is just not feasible at all. But it was good to hear that, that is a priority item. And going through these, just different reporting mechanisms, product families versus application numbers, submitting change requests, entering data at different frequencies. We heard that it was very fixed in that point. So we took a lot of these in and working with our technical team to kind of make sure that these can be accomplished for moving forward. Okay, so quality benchmarking study. So what was this? In 2020, FDA awarded a BAA contract to Dun & Bradstreet, who then collaborated with St. Gallen. And it was really, again, more of, FDA realizing that the narrative has really changed from just focusing on metrics, right? That the evolution has now said that metrics are just one small piece, right? And how do we kind of, well, what are the more important pieces when it comes to effective quality management practices, right? And how would we kind of capture that? So this study was really to characterize the global kind of network of facilities around what are effective quality management practices and what is the current state of these practices. And so we worked with Dun & Bradstreet and St. Gallen. I can kind of move on here. What we did was we worked with them to design, and I'm sure Professor Friedli will go into this later, to design a questionnaire that would collect data for enabler questions, which really show a maturity scale of where you are in implementation of SPC, for example, right? Or where you are in a maturity scale related to 5S program, or something, these types of questions that really kind of gauge maturity levels and quality management practices, and then collecting in parallel, right, some certain KPIs around delivery performance, quality, the different things that we've heard about, right? And then bringing these together at the end to kind of analyze the information, to draw correlations and do analytics on this, run regressions, et cetera, to figure out, okay, what are the kind of, where do the correlations and the positive relationships exist, right? And what is that telling us, right? It's telling us, that certain behaviors that are very highly correlated with certain KPIs related to delivery performance, for example, and I'll get into that. So it was a data-driven approach to get some insights around the state of quality management practices, and really use that information as we move forward. And I'll get into the quality management maturity program. So again, we had around 200 different sites globally participated. As I mentioned, there were these certain numerical, quantitative KPIs that were collected related to delivery, performance, quality, et cetera, people, maintenance. And then we also had these enabler questions, which were, kind of on a maturity scale, an ordinal 1 through 5 scale of where you are, kind of what is your current maturity state related to enabler 1, enabler 2, et cetera. And what we found, and again, it was, kind of supported in previous research Professor Friedli has done, is that quality was positively correlated with performance and identified as a major driver for operational excellence. And then some of the other, preliminary findings were that, again, here you see that quality and performance are there's a very nice correlation that exists here. And what it's showing you is that when you take quality, you take the KPIs and you kind of bring them together and normalize them. And then you kind of bring the other KPIs around maintenance, people, et cetera, and you remove quality and you quantify them, you see a very good relationship there. And what we also found was a very strong, you see on the right, the correlation coefficients that were existing between, these KPIs related to delivery, order fulfillment, adherence to lead time, really being linked to behaviors and maturity levels around 5S implementation, utilization of statistical quality control, behaviors around process bottlenecks, like are the companies proactive, and then also around CAPA effectiveness. So quality management maturity, where are we and where are we going? So some recent context, about 18 months ago, FDA published a report to Congress around the root causes and potential solutions to drug shortages. And one of the root causes that was identified is directly in here, is that the market does not recognize and reward manufacturers for mature quality systems that focus on continual improvement, early detection of supply chain issues. Right, that it's very recognized, it's hard for the market. There's no incentive, right, for these, from a market perspective, right, because all products are FDA approved, right? Everything is safe and effective. So where is the incentive to invest back into quality and really invest back into your infrastructure to drive more mature quality systems? Because that costs money, right? And so how do we fill that void? And so really what came out of that was developing a rating system to incentivize drug manufacturers to invest in QMM for their facilities, right? But how would that rating system look? How would it be transparent? Is it transparent to the GPOs? Is it transparent to the distributors, people that are making the purchasing decision? Because I know when I go to a pharmacy, right, I really have no say in the product that the pharmacist gives me, right? So how do we really transform the way that the market works, right? Because that's the crux here. And the program is aimed at recognizing and rewarding manufacturers for more mature quality systems that achieve, and these are big things here, sustainable compliance and focus on continual improvement, business continuity, and early detection of supply chain issues. So by no means would we be advocating that one drug product is more safe or effective, right? That's not what we're talking about. It's really the reliability and the maturity of the program that's manufacturing this, is that the level of assurance that to meet delivery requirements, to have adequate supply, all these different things are much higher than someone who doesn't have these systems in place. So again, the conversation has really evolved from metrics to quality management maturity, but you can't you can't split them up, right? Because they're one is a part of the other, right? That metrics are just one component of a much more mature quality system, right? When it comes to business continuity, the application of advanced analytics, QRM strategies in place, customer experience, all these different things that we've talked about, right, are a part of quality management maturity. But how do you bring this together to do an assessment around these areas, right, to drive a rubric, to do all these things? And that's, I'm going to be getting into that in a few minutes here. And this really just shows the steps to quality management maturity. And, CGMP really establishes that baseline standard for systems that assure proper design, monitoring, and control of the manufacturing process. And then the ICH-Q10 really, and that framework around Pqs effectiveness and where people are doing. And then you get QMM and how do you continue going up these steps, and what does it look like, right? It's easier said than done. So building a QMN program, where is CDER at right now? And we really have done a lot of engagement and learning from people that have things in place, right? PDA's quality culture tool, working with Tammy and her team around what Ispe is doing from advancing pharmaceutical quality and their Af Effectiveness program, and moving forward to some of these other initiatives that they're working on. University of St. Gallen, and throughout the past few years, working with Professor Friedli and his team to better understand, this more enterprise thinking, as opposed to the three quality metrics. CDRH's Case for Quality program and what they're doing, and how CMMI is helping facilitate that. What does CMMI's model look like? What are the things that they're looking at? Executing the Dun & Bradstreet benchmarking study, right? What are those data telling us? So last fall, in October, we announced through Federal Register notice 2 pilot programs using QMM assessments. And the pilot programs were focused on finished dosage form pilot that was open to domestic manufacturers, as well as a foreign pilot focused on API manufacturers. And then there was reasons for that, when it came to budgeting, when it came to the way our inventory is broken up. And we also, in parallel, awarded 2 contracts that would facilitate these assessments. So we have contractors that we're working with. We also have volunteers, companies that are volunteering to be a part of this. So that's kind of where we are right now. I'm going to get into some of the conversations that we're having with the contractors as the pilots are maturing. So what do we talk about when you saw Tammy's slide around this maturity scale, right? So we're envisioning the same thing. You have really looking for above the bar indicators, right? That, okay, the baseline is the people that are meeting GMP compliance, right? The people that have these things in place that are meeting the standards. But then how do you identify above the bar behavior, right? What does that rubric look like across, when you go back to this slide, right? Across all the things that people think are a part of quality management maturity, right? Creating questions, creating rubrics, creating standards that would quantify maturity across all these levels is not trivial. And what we've learned, working with the contractors is it's easy to put in these buzzwords that you think would be, level 4, level 5, supported through QRM applications, or, supported through, advanced statistical criteria. But then, understanding QRM, for example, right? Like anybody, it's easy to say, yes, yeah, I support this through a risk assessment or, QRM activities. But then honing in on, do your QRM activities, how do you control and minimize subjectivity? What are the tools that you're using? All these different things, that's where it gets tricky, to really call out the differences and discern people that are just answering the question, yeah, I support it through QRM activities, versus when somebody has a real, the expertise and mature QRM activities in place that are effective, as opposed to other companies that are just saying, yes, they do. Yeah. And so these are the difficulties to kind of call this information out through, number one, if you're going to do a kind of self-assessment, versus then what kind of evidence do you look for to support that score? So these are the conversations we're having with the contractors, because it's very easy to make things sound mature, right? But then, okay, well, how do you dig deeper, and how do you ensure that this is truly, a level 4 or level 5? And this is just an illustration. I know I'm running on time, so I want to make sure that I respect everyone's time. So this is just an illustration of kind of the things that we're thinking about. Okay, so you have a different topic area, right? You have a maturity scale, right? You have different questions within that topic area, and then within subtopic areas, right? And what are the characteristics or behaviors of someone that's a level 4 versus a level 3? And it can't just be adding these buzzwords, because you've got to have more support than that. And that's where we're really trying to hone in on, to make sure that it's not easy for people to just answer, yes, I am doing this, or I'm a level 4 or level 5. Really, that is reserved for, as Tammy and others have mentioned, best in class, and these people that really have the mature programs in place. But how do you tease that out, and how do you discern that? It is something that we're currently working through. So again, metrics are a key component of a mature and effective quality system. And it's really around using data and using analytics and these other strategies and more objective techniques to reduce quality issues and drive continual improvement efforts. And any QMM assessment conducted to assess a facility's QMN would be an evaluation at a given point in time, right? But then how do you kind of assure that level of maturity and improvement and in between, right? And we see metrics as an important piece to that, right? That it could help facilitate the level of confidence you have in between assessments. So key takeaways is that, current research indicates metrics and quality culture programs are good business practice, right? And that's something that Professor Friedli, throughout the many years that I've worked with him, it's consistent through the analyses that he's done. And we're seeing it in other spaces as well. Both strong metrics and culture programs are a part of a mature quality system. And we're, OPQ is continuing to engage stakeholders and support related academic research. We want this to be data driven. We don't want there to be anecdotal evidence that this works and that works, because also, Tammy had mentioned the new inspection protocol project, right? So how can we leverage some of the findings here to integrate into the new inspection protocol project? So we want data-driven things to be addressed, not just things that the FDA thinks would be valuable and beneficial. And And again, as I mentioned earlier, we're continuing to monitor the state of quality to ensure that every dose is safe and effective. So I think that is all I have. So again, I apologize if I went over time by a few minutes, but I will pass it back, and I look forward to the Q&A session.
So I will just continue. Welcome, everybody. My name is Thomas Friedli. My pleasure to be here today. Thanks for having me. The good thing today is, you know, I only have 15 minutes, but the big advantage I have is to talk as the third in this row. And if you just summarize what Tammy and Alex said, also about some Gallen research, there is not much I have to add. So that's a big advantage I have today. But I will nevertheless try to go in some of the points just mentioned a bit in the details, and also to come back to the quality benchmarking study Alex mentioned, because I also made a promise to the organizers that we will also show some of the most recent data available, also coming from this study, but also to provide some of the challenges we also see in really working with this data. So my title today is From Quality Maturity to Quality Performance. So what I intend also to do is to come back to a very basic St. Gallen concept. And this has been our approach since we started to work with the pharma industry back in 2004. The approach has always been not just to focus on an isolated piece, but always to try to see a pharmaceutical plant, a pharmaceutical company as an entire system, coming from there and deriving the right conclusions for what we would call sustainable improvements. And why this is very important for us, the very reason is that we have seen too many experiences where the main focus for improvements have been to drive down costs, to reduce inventories, to reduce headcounts. And what most have experienced, if these improvements have not been based on some stability, some robustness in the processes, they just had issues in other fields later on. And so what we always wanted to do is to help to really understand the whole and come from there. So what I intend to do over the next few minutes, after a short introduction, also in some of the basics on Gallen thinking, directly to go over to some possibilities to operationalize as well quality maturity as quality performance. And then in the third part, I try to bring this together, and I will end with a short outlook into how the future could look like. So that's just to provide you with an idea where we are coming from. When it comes to operational excellence in pharma, currently we are probably the #1 in the academic world. So we are running for years now the second largest benchmarking in this field for the pharma industry, comprising today data from around 390 production sites, 110 labs. And based on this data, we also have a lot of opportunities to help to structure operational excellence program, to help to implement production systems, and this across the whole pharma industry. So with the big research-driven companies, with generics, with contract manufacturer. And based on that, we also had a lot of other opportunities. We are working for years now with Ispe in the quality matrix team. We collaborated and collaborate with PDA when it comes also to quality culture. We run also some industry groups, bringing them together in the topics of operational excellence and quality control, laboratories, and so on. So it gives us quite a nice position, and especially also the last 4 years, Alex mentioned it, where we had quite some interaction with the FDA, gave us an additional perspective on pharma production and pharma data, which was quite valuable also for our whole work. Okay, and also to give you a sort of idea how we deal with data. You know, sometimes there is an assumption that you just have to have it. You run some algorithms on this, some analytics, and you will have an outcome. In reality, it usually does not really work like that. So what we always see is if you don't start with some assumptions, with some also theories, how the interdependencies in data could look like, it's quite hard to really make sense of data, especially when we talk about the whole plant. If we talk about also different technologies, if we talk about different regions in the world, it always needs some basic understanding before you can really then hope to make sense of the data. And these are just two of the models which are quite close to the way how we then look on data. The left-hand side is what Alex just mentioned, that we confirm time after time, analysis after analysis, is that the only way to sustainable improve also in cost figures, in time figures, is that you build this on quite a stable, robust process control. If you're not in control of your processes, forget all the other things. This will only be short-term gains, and that's sometimes forgotten in a lot of the activities going on in the industry with a relentless pressure on costs alone. And like I said, if you don't build this on some quality, it just won't work out or only in the short term. The other model at the right-hand side, also quite a famous one coming from operations management research, just shows you one thing. You know, in a lot of cases, you will see companies who just look on KPIs, and not always from an overall perspective, sometimes going from one KPI to the other, comparing them across plants, looking at some of them, say, oh, looks a bit strange. That's probably not the best way dealing with that. And what we usually do is we try on the one hand to have quite a comprehensive overall performance understanding, including cost, quality, time data. And on the other hand, we also try to link this to a certain maturity you have. And if you bring this together, it's just another discussion. You know, it gives you another angle. You will see if higher implementation really paid off, or if you're just on the way to something. You will also see if your performance is not so bad, but it's just based on no capabilities at all. So that's what I just wanted to highlight, what we mean when we say we build also what we are doing on some basic models, which are quite powerful then when it comes to the interpretation. And the objective is always to help to set the right priorities for sustainable improvements. So I don't have to become too long here, but these are 3 ways how we operationalize the maturity in the past. The left-hand side just shows you the most comprehensive tool we have in the market. It's the standard St. Gallen operational excellence benchmarking, where we base the maturity on in total 185 questions. We ask them, like you have seen it in the 2 presentations before, on a Likert scale from 1 to 5 to some degree, and this includes also full operationalization of Q10. What you see in the middle and at the right-hand side is the operationalization we applied for the ISP guide, what Tammy mentioned with the pre and post assessment. So it's a full operationalization of Q10 on the one side, and we included the categories which were also part of the quality benchmarking study we did together with Dun & Bradstreet for the FDA. So the same categories. In the ISP part, because it includes the whole Q10 architecture, you end up with 98 questions. In the QBS, it was 18 in these 3 categories. By the way, developed highly interactively with the agency. So originally, we wanted to include less because the big challenge in this QBS study was that it was aimed at including plants from across the world. So originally, it was aimed at 52 different countries. And as we knew from the past that there will be big differences in what they are doing, we thought that it would just be too much, too overwhelming if we would make this too broad. And in the interaction, discussion, dialogue with the agency, we finally ended up with this 18, and we made sure that also when we link this to our comprehensive assessment, that's a good subset, surrogating to some degree performance measure more comprehensively. Also, when it comes to performance, we had a lot of different operationalizations in the past. The left-hand side is what we used in year 1 of the FDA quality matrix research in this collaborative grant. You see what went into this, a bit more than 3 matrix. Just the idea was to have quite a comprehensive measurement. You see what went into it in the QBS and the APQ score. There were some more, but for the later analysis, we excluded some of them because they were too sensitive. Also to regional specifics, I would say it like that. And you see also a much shorter score, just taking the 3 most telling one of a subset. And now when we bring this a bit together, that's St. Gallen legacy analysis, which you can see it in a year 1 report where we had a certain correlation between this maturity score and the overall performance. And you see also the top plants that they almost all are in the top right corner in this analysis. So gives some confidence that if you build on your maturity, that you will finally see a positive impact on an overall performance score, finally also helping you to improve your cost situation. Now, when we take some QBS data, so from this benchmarking Alex mentioned, including 208 plants from quite a lot of countries. For example, we had 21 plants in India. We had more than 70 in Asia. So compared to legacy St. Gallen work, where we for sure had a certain bias on European and US data, that's quite a difference. And just I have selected 3 regions here to give you an idea that maybe you cannot analyze them as an integrated data set because there are just differences in the patterns you see. And it needs quite some digging where they are coming from and what this really means at the end of the day. In North America and the United States, we see quite a nice correlation. In India, it's even negative, and you see that the plants are scattered all around. So it's a good question where this is really coming from. So based on the model I have shown at the beginning with this maturity performance fields, you see you have here plants in for all 4 of them, and it might be an interesting question where I have the highest compliance risk here. I come back to this in a minute. Europe, interestingly, in the performance part, it's really a big difference between the plants' maturity. Almost all of them are quite at the right-hand side. So also an interesting pattern to see. And now what we have done here for these 3 regions you have just seen, we included an easy to calculate, let me say, compliance score. We just took the share of no action indicated inspections to all inspections. So the higher the score, you better you have been in this area. And now coming back to the 4 different groups you have seen in the very first model, just have a short look at India. The best score, also inspection score, to say it like that, you have in the high effectiveness, high maturity field. So no surprises here. When you go to where you have the highest risk, low effectiveness, low maturity, so that is not really a surprise, but you also see that there seems to be a higher risk in this high effective, so the performance is not so bad, but there is not based on any capability, so the maturity is quite low. So that's the second worst score overall in this field. And to summarize this a bit, what we believe where you should go, Alex mentioned, we started with the draft guidance matrix, them alone. Then we said maybe you need some context to come to a right interpretation. Then we added the whole enabler space with this maturity. And finally here we also add some additional findings from, let me say, legacy inspection outcomes. And what we believe what the future will also look like is that this will even become more comprehensive, because what we didn't involve so far is that there are also a lot of other signals you could detect in the market, in some patient forums, wherever you could look at some employer ratings. So finally, we believe to really get a comprehensive understanding about a plant, the risk which might be involved, it needs an inclusion of maturity, outcome performance, compliance, plus easily accessible external signals. And when you bring this together, you might be there where you can really say there is a higher risk, where is lower risk, but also where you have to finally improve. So thank you very much for your attention. And I would like to directly hand over to Nuala so that we still have then some minutes to discuss later on.
Thank you, Thomas. I'm going to see if I can share my screen now. Now, last but not least, hopefully we've still managed to keep you intact. And thank you to the 3 previous speakers for setting this up nicely. So I'm going to bring you through some practical strategies for building cultural excellence to support some of these enhanced quality outcomes that Thomas and Alex and indeed Tammy have been talking about. So some opening thoughts, first of all. This talk could also be called Joining Nuala's Book Club. What am I reading at the moment? And a lot of the work that we do, whether it's through the ISPE volunteer communities or indeed through the work that I do at TU Dublin, the University in Dublin, through the industry research that we do along with St. Gallen, or indeed through the work that I do with industry, particularly around this area of cultural excellence, I am finding that it's as much about learning to unlearn as it is about learning to learn. So a few thoughts on this. This is one of the books I'm reading at the moment, and it's really struck me. It's from Adam Grant, Think Again. You can see it's a New York Times bestseller. But he talks about the power of knowing what you don't know. And certainly in the work that I do in industry, when we're looking at, enhanced performance, whether that's through operational excellence, continual improvement programs, or indeed looking at the broader holistic sense of the cultural excellence, I am working, with the regulated life science sector, largely speaking with scientists and engineers, and I've realized that our issue is that we're not still thinking like scientists. Now, Professor Friedli presented some wonderful scientific data there and how they've looked at the hypotheses, established the assumptions, and we've learned this in our original thinking. I started life as an engineer and then went on and did a PhD in regulatory science. But many of us no longer go back to that first principles of understanding what we don't know and then establishing an opportunity to look at that. And Adam Grant talks about this concept of preachers, prosecutors, and politicians. And then he proposes that we should think more like scientists. So my drive now is to get us, the scientific community, to think more like scientists again. And when he talks about preachers, it's really about those faith, believers, believe me, I'm right, evangelizing their beliefs. And of course, prosecutors is I'm right, you're wrong. It's a win-lose situation in terms of, some of that arm wrestling we do around investigations and deviation closeouts and things like that. And I think after the year that we've had, I don't even need to go into, what can happen when the politicians are in charge. So it's getting back to that scientific thinking is what we want to do. And he describes that as if you're a scientist by trade, rethinking is fundamental to your profession. You're paid to be constantly aware of the limits of your understanding. You're expected to doubt what you know and be curious about what you don't know and update your views based on new data. And that's really what we're talking about here. We've even heard Alex very candidly sharing that they have learned a lot by going back out to industry and engaging in that dialogue. And for me, it's all about the dialogue. We can have as many excellent quality management systems as we like. They're still run and the decisions are still made by the people. And of course, the other area that we've encountered a lot of overlap in terms of, when we go in and talk to people about cultural excellence or building a culture of excellence, is they say, oh yeah, we're doing lots of work around our culture at the moment. Everybody's got their diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging programs going. And of course they have a place, but really what we're talking about here is enhancing performance through the people. And so while for me, it's less important about, the color of the skin, the gender, the race, the sexual orientation, all of that is less important to me. But what's really important to me when we're making decisions, particularly about, let's say, risk-based decisions, is this diversity of thought. And by having a range of people in the room, that's how we create that diversity of thought and ensuring that they come from different backgrounds. And it is about making it a safe space and creating that sense of belonging. That's really important, where people feel they have a role to play and they feel their connection to the patient. So what are we talking about when we're talking about culture of excellence? We're not talking about culture at all. When we're coming in to talk about culture, we're really talking about the values and behaviors that are important to your organization. And they've probably been defined and they may even be painted up on the walls somewhere. But how much of the time is being spent in terms of actually getting people to live into those values and behaviors every day? And how much of the time do we tolerate behaviors that are not contributing to successful outcomes? And that's really when we talk about this culture of excellence, that's really what we're talking about. So we're talking about focusing in, pinpointing on the behaviors that contribute to success, doing more of those, and also being open and honest in the dialogue and with the data and with knowing what we don't know about the behaviors that contribute, to unsuccessful outcomes, to failures. And being able to have that honest dialogue without fear of blame, and to be able to say, okay, well, we need to go back to the drawing board, and being more scientific about when we have a near miss or a failure. So it's an opportunity for learning. It's not an opportunity for blame. So people can step forward and speak freely about that. So of course, when we're talking about people and the values and behaviors, we're talking about you. That's who we're talking about. It's all about getting to those individuals and identifying with them the impact that their work can have and the decisions or indecision and the actions and inactions that they can take every day. So it really is, this culture of excellence really is about enhancing the performance for the organization through the people. And understanding the why is really, really important. So we need to remind ourselves of what does the patient expect? And Alex, we hadn't actually swapped sides, but we're on the same page here. High quality, available medicines delivered on time in the correct dose at an affordable price. Back to those Q10 objectives of high quality medicines and available in the marketplace in terms of public health. So there's our patient, and we need to ensure that those people who are involved in that high jump, high dive every day feel their connection to the patient. And here's just a standard industry stakeholder analysis. We've got the regulator, and certainly many of the organizations that I work with, sometimes you would think that their regulator is their key stakeholder, not the patient, because that's what they're working towards: inspection readiness, a compliance score. But of course, the patient must be at the center of everything we do. And more importantly, there you are again. What you do matters, and that's what this Culture of Excellence program is really about. It's about connecting with those individuals so that they understand that that they're partnered as a key stakeholder with the patient, and that those patients rely on you to have their best interests at heart every batch, every day. And it's about making that connection for people. So it's critical that we maintain a clear line of sight between everybody in the fragmented supply chain to the patient at all times, and that they have an understanding of recognizing the impact of your actions on the long-term outcomes for the patient. So that's what this program of Culture of Excellence is all about. And building that culture of excellence is about making sure that you start with the why, that you find practical strategies to make the patient real for for yourself and your colleagues every batch, every day, and that you understand your connection to that patient. Now, when we talk about the power of the individual, the power of you, we also talk about spreading the excellence from the few to the many and getting that to roll out in terms of the power of the many. It's mobilizing the power of the entire workforce to enhance the outcomes. It's making sure that every set of eyes and ears are being watchful for any risk event or any adverse event or any deviation or lab incident that might be arising. And that's not just the bailiwick of the quality unit, or worse still, of the folks who are looking perhaps at risk management within the quality unit. That everybody is mobilizing that every day. And from Bob Sutton, in terms of his Scaling Excellence, here's another book. Excellence cannot be commanded from above. It must be made contagious, individual to individual. And the trick is in knowing how to transfer the right mindsets and those best practices without any voltage loss as they spread. So it's getting that contagious. It's about the employees getting engaged in the process, and that's a key aspect of the programs that we're going to share with you. So let's get practical, because that's definitely what we're focusing on. Tammy mentioned earlier on the ISPE Cultural Excellence Report published in 2017. You'll be glad to know that it's so important, it's free to all members. So the link is there. If you don't already have a copy of this and you're a member of ISPE, which probably you are if you're here on this webinar, I would strongly recommend that you get your hands on it. Better than that, there's a team of us that were working on the original guide report in 2017. We're now back as the Culture 2.0, and I'll share some of the work that we're doing in that. But it's really about practical tools. It's a 6 dimensions, starting with the leadership and vision, moving around about how do you shift those attitudes and mindsets. The piece about Gemba is really about engagement. It's go to where the work is. As Tammy mentioned earlier on, I would also say go to where the worker is and have that dialogue to better understand what the expectation is and where the potential barriers are in terms of their being able to deliver on that. Then there's the thing about metrics and having them more leading. So many of us are driving our businesses by looking in the rear view mirror. So many of our quality dashboards are largely lagging. We're looking at the last month, the last quarter, rather than being predictive and preventative in terms of leading metrics. And then oversight and reporting and those key cultural enablers. What do we need to do in the learning and development of our organizational capabilities? So there's 17 embedded tools, 3 case studies, and 4 detailed appendices, all bunched into that 100-page report. I would strongly recommend you get it. Here's some of the tools. We've got Gemba walk tools where we've got recommended frequencies for each different function, you know, whether it's a leader, a supervisors, area managers, and so on and so forth. We've got, you know, what it is, what it isn't, a pocket guide for questions you might be asking when you're out there. We've got the 5 Ds of leader influence, and we talk about, you know, how your voice as a leader is really important. Are you living into those values, and are you modeling those values for your teams? It's about being visible. I know it's difficult in this age of COVID, but it's about, you know, getting out there and making sure you're visible, and being vigilant about follow through and accountability and ownership, as well as ensuring we have a really clearly communicated vision, and that's aligned with the organizational strategy. Because sometimes that's often, you've got a vision over here, but the strategy is something else. Not to mention that the goals and objectives might not even be lined up. We look at quality culture capability. How do you go from low capability up to higher capabilities, and a wide range of oversight and reporting tools, such as this lovely heat map that we have in there and how that can be used. And Tammy mentioned we've the 21 key behavioral assessment in Appendix 1 of the guide as well, of how can you assess the quality culture or the culture of excellence behaviors within your organization. Here's a nice one, which is about how do you get to shift those mindsets. And we identified 4 key behaviors: accountability, ownership, action orientation, and speak up. And I'm sure if I even just focus in on this one, you know, how do we move from a lower maturity where we might be having a more reactive orientation? That's the firefighting that we do every day, where we spend most of our time responding to and fixing problems, all the way up to a more proactive on that higher maturity scale, where we spend our time identifying issues proactively and intervening to minimize any potential negative impacts on either quality or compliance, or indeed organizational performance. So how do we shift from the left to the right? And there's maturity tools in there. Here's one around how do we design better metrics, and particularly for the local teams, how do we design leading behavioral indicators to get them to focus on those maybe at their shift huddles and tier meetings, so that they can connect their activities to the overall higher business metrics might be there. Here's a little bit about the Culture 2.0 of what we're working on. We've almost finished a Gemba companion tool for those APQ self-assessment teams. A lot of the self-assessment that Tami introduced at the beginning, the maturity guides, we've used the same maturity model, but in this case, we're looking at the people and the behaviors, whether they're management and leadership, or whether it's the teams, the engaged employees, down on the shop floor and at the lab bench. So as well as going out and assessing aspects of the systems and the processes that they're using, there's a set of key questions here that you might be, or behaviors you might be looking to observe while you're looking and seeing. I think a key thing that Tami also mentioned, the APQ maturity assessment concept, it's not an audit. It's about getting out there and looking and seeing and having the dialogue with those process owners, process users, and seeing where there's opportunities for improvement. We're just about to launch a webinar, so keep your eyes peeled on your ISPE inbox around reward and recognition. This is a key part of developing a culture of excellence. It's about ensuring that people, not only do they connect to the patient, not only do they see the impact of their work, but that their peers and their leaders are recognizing them appropriately. And the research is telling us these days that peer-to-peer recognition is a huge motivator for teams to go the extra mile, to look at those improvement opportunities. And yes, I know we all have these reward processes in our companies, you know, where your manager can award you some points and so on and so forth. They're interesting and nice to get, but really we're trying to really show the benefit and the distinction between recognition peer-to-peer and team recognition when you've got continuous improvement or OpEx teams working together. Next up, we're looking at additional case studies. We're hoping to develop something on tiered accountability, or that tier process, which is really around that employee engagement piece. We're also looking to develop a human error reduction A3 sample, which is a continual improvement example of how you might go about reducing preventable errors in your organization. And a key thing that's come up in the last year for all of us who are working in this space is, how do we continue to build culture when we're doing it through a Zoom call? So with virtual teams, and how do we build those learning organizations when we can't make that personal interaction? So we might produce an article or some thoughts and tips on that. So that's the work of the Cultural Excellence team, and all of this is published out through the ISPE. So stay close. We're all about having practical strategies to help you improve things in your organization. And finally, back to what's Nuala reading. This is another recent book that hit my inbox, State of Readiness, from Joseph Parrish on operational excellence. And I particularly wanted to share with you how he defines operational excellence. And he talks about it as being in this state of readiness and aligning with the business strategy. But he specifically gets in then and says, it's where the corporate culture is committed to the continuous and deliberate improvement of company performance and the circumstances of those who work there. So I love that, because it's about that mindset of continuous and deliberate improvement, but it's also taking into the perspective that it's all about the people. And that's how we're going to deliver this enhanced performance. And it is a precursor to becoming a high performance organization. So I hope you've enjoyed your whistle-stop tour through my book club this month. And a big thank you to the Culture 2.0 team and all of my collaborators there. It's a huge amount of work from a great volunteer base. So thank you for your time today, and I'm looking forward to the panel discussion. So I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Nuala, and thank you to all of the speakers. It's been, it's just been thrilling to see that all the different angles and the way that to approach all this paradigm of how do we improve the quality of our pharmaceutical industry, and to see it from all those different aspects, from the data side, from the people side, from the regulatory side. I'm hoping that the audience join with me in their appreciation of that. I'd also like to just to say that I think there's some really good opportunities here with this audience of who are the cream of the quality profession that we have in the pharmaceutical industry here. I think there's a great number of opportunities to volunteer, either with the ISP initiatives and programs, but also with the FDA and St. Gallen initiatives and programs as well going forward. So I'm hoping that it's a good way to connect your programs with the audience here today. That's really great. Do look at the questions. These are some of the questions that came in during the talk. I'm sure that during the last session you had a couple of other thoughts. I'm not surprised that the top voted question, Alex, is one for you. The Quality Metrics Program started as a mandatory reporting program. With the last revision, it's now voluntary. What really is the future of that as a voluntary program, or going in the future, if you wouldn't mind just sharing your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay, Heather?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. So very good question, and this is something that we get a lot. So yeah, the original guidance outlined a mandatory program, and then the revised draft kind of spoke to a voluntary program. Where we see metrics moving forward in the future is really a mandatory program. That we think metrics are an important piece of the future state of the way we perform surveillance and the way that we assess quality. So the goal is for in long term, as we set up the regulatory strategy for a mandatory program.
Thanks, Alex. I think hopefully that's clear for whoever asked that particular question. Our next question then is for Tammy, and I think that sort of the Tammy's question, the next question, and the next one are kind of similar. Tammy, the question was, what are the key learnings that you found when piloting the APQ program in industry?
Sure. So, I would say, first of all, it was really received well by industry. We had 12 different sites that actually took this into from 12 different companies and actually applied the learnings and used the assessment model, understood what metrics they would use, and then, understood some of those improvement tools. And what I would say is the first one is that we found that it can be used both, at a manufacturing site is where we generally think about using this type of a model, but also at oversight locations. So either corporate locations or contract manufacturing oversight locations, maybe it's an office, can also use the QMM model that we've built with APQ. We really gained very positive feedback on the descriptors, what we used for each level in the rubric, and understanding our APQ model. We were asked to actually take that top model, level 5 maturity, which is the highest maturity, and to make that really truly transformational. So we had a lot of great, really powerful things in there, but we really wanted to align that with Pharma 4.0. Digitization, really, just absolute best in practice being that highest level. That's very difficult to achieve. And then, another piece I would say that our team really felt was really important is not just having the assessment, the tools, the process, but really showing an example and, so that they could actually understand how to apply it, but then also how to document their demonstrated evidence for each of the different areas in the rubric. So it was really helpful to do that as well. The last piece I would say that we got some great feedback on was in the tools, because there are other assessments in industry that are available, and that tells you kind of where you're at. But industry was saying, so what? What does that mean? What next? What now? They needed a powerful way to improve themselves, and so we've taken, really provided a solid assessment, really provided a powerful set of different measures that can be chosen, but then also really provided at the different levels of maturity, different tools that you can use to advance your maturity. And I think that really helped us in building a very solid program and a solid tool for industry to use. Great question,
Sorry.
thank you.
That sounds like where are we now and what's next?
Yeah, exactly.
Great. And similarly, Thomas, what was your biggest aha moment learning from that FDA Dun & Bradstreet's and Gallen's benchmark study?
Great question. How much time do I have? No, just kidding. I think what's always crucial also to see is we are talking about different things. If we are talking about the standard Gallen benchmark and this more recent QBS study. I think what we realized again is that to some degree, it can also be dangerous if you just analyze data based on statistics. Because, some of the first analysis we did when we just had this data from 200 plus plants, if we would have stopped there and just displayed some significant findings, I would say the conclusions drawn from this would be totally wrong. And that's sometimes the danger with data. And this became really evident in this specific data set. That's the reason why I displayed this today, not all together, but already differentiated by regions, because the patterns are just different, and mixing this all together and then look for some significant findings will be totally wrong. And this can be really dangerous. And I think for us, what we always try to do is that we can explain what we are seeing. And if this is not possible, that's for us just a signal that we are not there yet in the understanding. And it also sometimes means that to really make sense of the data, you should go there where it has been generated. And that's again, it's a bit of difficulty when we talk about maturity assessments. When you do that, we try to do a lot to be really clear. What is a 1, what is a 2, what is a 3? So quite similar to all the big work which ISP has spent on defining the scales when it comes to the APQ program. But nevertheless, the issue is that if you give this same question to somebody who does not know yet what is really excellent and what not, that he will always be too positive in his first judgment where he really is. And that's something we also know from the start of the St. Gallen benchmarking. Plants which participated every 2 years in the St. Gallen benchmarking, guess what? They became more critical about their excellence over time, because really starting to work on your excellence shows you that there is still a lot you can do more. And if you underestimate that and just take the data and you compare it to completely different things, it's quite hard to then derive the right thing. And that's what I mean. It needs also some experience in making sense of data and then also digging deeper. And there is still a lot more to do also now with this more recent data set. I think the big chance we have is to finally get a better handle to understand really differences between world regions. So that's a big advantage. But also there, I just make one other example. One of the KPIs we usually like to have are, for example, safety figures or are also sick leaves, because to some degree, when you do this in Europe, for example, and you look at the sick leave rates, the higher this is, usually it gives you some idea that maybe it's not the most sound culture you will find there. If you collect the same data point in China or in India, guess what? It's just not the same messaging, as you cannot afford not to go to work. So already comparing between Switzerland and the United States will be quite difficult, because in Switzerland, if you're not at work, you're still paid if you are sick. So that's not an issue. So this has a big impact on the data and how you can use that. And I would say we were not absolutely clear about all of this before. And there are a lot of other examples going in this direction. So for that, we were lucky that we can still mirror part of this analysis against data we have from our legacy work. And at the end, it's all about really derive a sound understanding and also build the right messaging on that, because without that, it can become totally wrong. So that's just my opinion.
Did anybody have to? Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, Professor Friedli, one of the other things that I found interesting to kind of echo your sentiment around overemphasizing too much on the statistical analyses. It's interesting to see that there were certain relationships within the data that countered the theory, right? When we saw negative correlations, and what is that telling us? Was something that one of the aha moments going through the data with your team and Dun & Bradstreet is that these relationships are completely contrary to what the theory is around, better behaviors or better maturity levels in this area would lead to better performing KPIs. And certain relationships, you didn't see that, right? That you saw the opposite. So I think, as you pointed out, that, just looking at the data can bias the conclusions, and really additional context and more insights to better understand not only the kind of the cultural factors, but also the measurement system that's being used. I think and how that's calibrated is an important piece too.
Does anybody else have any other comment on that same topic? Okay, I'll go on to the next question here, and I'm going to kind of preface that a little bit as well, because of another question that was a little later, and it carries on from that same thought about looking at the data. The question here is it possible to assess the quality maturity without being on site? And I think there's a lot behind that one. But there was also a question about relying on that data. And do you feel that without being on site, without assessing that on site, if you're just looking at that data, did you find it in the data that it was able to relying on metrics in the data could be susceptible to gaming, and that with being on site, you might be able to see those kind of things? Was there flags that came up in the metadata help to flag those kind of situations in the data? I guess, again, Professor Friedli, that's probably for you first, but I'm sure other people will have something to add to that.
Yeah, it's absolutely fair question to ask, and you can imagine that we ask this very question a lot of time. There are some ways of dealing with that, and one is to just triangulate the maturity measures you get against other figures. So you know that's the reason that we always like to have a maturity and performance, and in the Gallen model you can really allocate single KPIs to specific fields, behaviors, whatever. And for us, how we work with this data, the main idea is always to help a site and an establishment to become better. So for us, that's not the final outcome to have the data and having run some analytics. That's the starting point for the discussion with the site leadership to engage people into this. So then you know that it comes together, the realities on the ground with the data. But at least what we can do is we can highlight where there is no real storyline. Whenever you see that they are doing a lot for their equipment stability, for the process stability, but you just see that the OE is bad or the deviations are high, that's then the starting point for the discussion. So my answer is you always have opportunities to triangulate some of these things. And that's the reason that we say, hey, do not only do your maturity assessments, think about how you can bring this together with performance outcomes, take it together, find the right way to go forward. And finally, in our interaction with industry, the main reason why companies are engaging with us is that they really want to know how to get better. There is no reason to game the data. The only thing what I have just mentioned, sometimes you just do not know that you are not yet on a 4 or a 5, but it's rather a 3 or a 2. So you need to get also some experience in going in this direction. And final comment, I always like to also see the site and not only the data, and to talk to the people and to listen to them, because this complements the whole picture. But what I also expect a bit looking forward, that we will see that at least part of maybe also the regulatory activities are done more and more in a remote version, not only because of pandemics, but also based on resources, and we have to find ways to work with that.
Alex, I guess
that leads right into you a little bit. Oh,
I would love to jump in on that one as well. I think it's really important. Like we've all struggled with, the engagement where we formerly would have been on site with boots on the ground and having that dialogue. And it is what it is the past year. So the assessment itself, though, I think this is really important. There are ways that you can include dialogue even in a virtual. It's much more difficult, but there are ways. So you've got to then build out part of this triangulation around the data is also looking at who are the voices of the key stakeholders or the voices of the customers that we would want to talk to. And only having an engagement with the leadership is you're only looking at things through one lens there. So one of the tools that's in the Cultural Excellence Guide, Appendix 4, it actually has a series of conversations, and it was at the time when we built it around our external network, our CMOs, and we described a series of discussions you would have with leadership, with middle management, with the quality unit, with people on the floor, and then you scored that on a risk, and what you were looking for was a divergence between the conversation you had with leadership saying, oh yeah, we do all that and we do this and the other. And then you get down to the shop floor and they're saying, we don't know anything about that. We don't do that at all. So you're looking for that divergence of opinion or a consistent message that the folks on the shop floor are completely comfortable with having the conversation and they're speaking the same language as their leaders. So that's one tool you can use. As I say, when we went back in 2017, we did that to enable that dialogue with the external partnerships. Now our internal folks are also external to us because we can't get on a flight. But the other thing I would say about this is the APQ program that Tami introduced earlier on, and I've been working with them on this as well. It's a plan, do, check, act. It's your classic Deming plan, do, check, act. So it's not just assess. You actually have to aspire, which is the next piece, which is identify where are the priorities and what are the opportunities for us to improve given our context. And then you have to advance using the catalogue of improvement tools that are in the guide as well. And then you have to check at the last piece, which is that you have to take the action. You do the review and you take the action. And did we do enough, or do we need to go back and look? Okay, we've enough done there. Now we can go on to the next Q10. So it's not just about the assessment. You have to man up and follow through. You've got to actually take the action. And part of that action will involve a series of dialogues with the owners of those improvement and activities that you're working with. So I know we've lived in the Brady Bunch Celebrity Squares land for so long now, but that's, you've got to work with your stakeholders and have those one-to-ones with the voice of the stakeholders and identify the demographic of who would be appropriate to talk to and figure out how you get that engagement in a virtual world.
Thanks.
Yeah, this is Alex. Real quick to echo something Nuala just said is that I do think it's possible, right? Relying solely on a self-assessment, obviously there's potential issues for that, but the engagement with the right parties is important, and you have to ensure that you're not just talking to anybody that's done a audit, assessment, et cetera, right? You got to talk to the right people because there's potential bias in just talking to leadership, right? And I think that any leadership position, right, the perception of your organization is probably much higher than talking to shop floor associates. So I think it's engaging the right people just as you would do on any type of assessment. And in the virtual space, right, that's something that we're trying to work with our contractors on is how are these assessments going to be done in a virtual space because of COVID. So again, I would agree with Nuala that it's possible, and the engagement with the right folks in a virtual space is also beneficial.
I wanted just to add a quick question on to the end of that is, do you think that with the mutual recognition agreements, PICs and those kind of things, that being able to rely on the local regulators to have those more one-to-one on-site discussions and for the different agencies around the world to leverage that, do you think that's possibly, that's the way forward? Yeah,
I mean, I think, the way MRA is going, and again, I'm not an expert and completely up to date with everything going on, but I do think, that has been one of the ways that we've adapted as an organization through COVID is, more reliance on our, foreign regulatory partners that, and as you mentioned, how they're moving forward into the future, right? That even post-pandemic world, is that something that we can also leverage? And I would say, my opinion is yes.
Thanks a lot. Alex, the next question in the list was really fit for you, and I think it is a couple of similar topics. I'll just read the one, which was benefits or care will be provided to industry to participate in the Qmn program. Is there going to be, is it similar to the CDER benefits, which I'm not aware of, so I'm sure you probably are.
Yeah. So what are the advantages? So, like CDER, some of the things that coming out of the CDER benefits are, obviously inspection, reduction, kind of, I can't remember, the equivalent to their supplements, reduced amount of time it takes to process, change and supplements. And I think that, what we've heard a lot through engagements is that, it's not, yes, right? Inspection frequency from a surveillance perspective, right? We should start incorporating these components in there to make a decision, right? But that's just one piece of how inspection frequency is decided upon. There's a lot of other risk factors that go into the model. The type of products that you manufacture. Are you manufacturing sterile products? Because it's not so much predictive, right? We're trying to, it's a risk-based model that accounts for, probability, severity, and detectability, right? The components of risk, and really, so QMN will just add one piece to the puzzle, right? So what are some other carrots that can be provided? And really, where I see an opportunity is as Q12 kind of matures, and we talk about established conditions and regulatory flexibility, right? That when established conditions are proposed either through an original or a supplement, right? That we can use information, because what essentially that's asking is how confident are we in the PQS of this particular site to be able to provide them that flexibility. And I think right now, as I mentioned, we have a gap. We don't have a lot of information when people have effective systems in place or mature systems in place. We know when people do things poorly. So I think that will really help facilitate the regulatory flexibility discussions when it comes to established conditions and Q12 kind of future state.
Thanks, Alex. And I'm going to find a question that I feel that to ask for Tammy in here. Maybe this one from Ruth on regarding the QBS. I think that's a question, Tammy, that's kind of in your area here. How are we ensuring apples to apples comparison from company to company? Is there any concern about subjectivity or misalignment in interpretation of the questions and assessments?
So I believe this is the quality benchmarking study, and how that was compared. So that would probably be more for Alex and for Thomas.
Thanks, Tammy.
Maybe one of the things we are doing is we won't, for example, not compare a sterile liquid producer to a solid manufacturer somewhere. So we really have predefined some specific peer groups to really make it comparable as fair as possible. For a comparison, you still need a certain size, a certain cohort to be able to work with the data. So that's one of the things. If the question was also in the direction, if you deal with complete different basic understandings about what we are talking about, that makes it a bit more difficult. But that's the reason that we also keep, at the moment at least, the regions together. Sometimes you also have to see that it's not necessarily the country culture who has the biggest impact. it can also be the company culture. So a plant from one of the big pharma companies in India can work quite similar like it would be in the US or in Europe. So there is a lot of things you have to keep in mind, and that's exactly what we also intend to do, to really understand what are moderators which really make things different. That's what I meant, that we have to better understand the patterns and then go a step deeper. And like I said, we also use this as one source. And whenever we see something, we go back also to legacy data to be sure at the end that what we are telling, what the messaging is, also holds true in the reality. It's not easy, and there is a lot of things to take into consideration, and still a lot of work to do with this data.
Thanks, Thomas. I have found a good question for Tammy to look at, and it's from Christian. He asks, how is the digitization reflected in the APQ guide? How is digital maturity matched with APQ maturity? He didn't see that called out particularly.
Absolutely. So thank you, Christian, for that. Christian is actually part of our team that is going to be helping us to build out our process performance and product quality monitoring guide. And this is the particular guide that I feel has such a strong linkage to digitalization, to artificial intelligence, to natural language processing, all of these aspects that can really be tied into that highest maturity level for an organization. And so, I really see this being built into that high level 5 maturity level. And then I see, a lot of people are learning in this aspect. So we really want to align APQ with the Pharma 4.0 process, with understanding that digitalization and really tying in appropriately, these elements into the maturity aspects as well, and building that into the detailed model so that teams can not only learn, but also, that it can be part of that improvement tool to get you from one level of maturity to help you advance to the next.
Yeah, and if I might just jump in on one thing there as well, to remind, in all of the APQ guides, there's that, assess, aspire, advance, and act and advance. And in the Aspire report, there's a summary in the Aspire report where the improvement recommendations from the self-assessment team to the process owners and the site leadership include people, process, technology, and governance. So there's an opportunity at that point in time to kind of distinguish. We've seen a gap. We're making some recommendations around improvement, and some of those improvements may be around implementing a technology to enable to close that gap. So we do call it out in the Aspire report section of the report as well as what Tammy just said in terms of the process performance and product quality monitoring, which obviously a lot of the opportunities around some of the tools that Alex has been talking about with machine learning and AI can really come in that Industry 4.0 or Pharma 4.0 concept.
Thanks. So I think we're going to call that a close. Alex certainly looks like he's had to step out for the end of this session. I appreciate you everybody running. Oh, he's back. Appreciate everybody running over a little bit today. I think there's been some really good discussion. Nuala, I mentioned earlier that you have a webinar coming up as well. So I'll give you another chance to just promote that.
Yeah, we haven't got a date, but as soon as we have a date, it'll be around that reward and recognition program from the Culture 2.0 about how you can better tailor your reward and recognition programs to really motivate the teams to go that extra yard in terms of the improvement opportunities in the organization. So coming to a screen near you soon.
Thanks, Nuala, and thanks, Alex. Thanks, Tammy, and thanks, Dr. Professor Friedli as well for joining us today. It's been really a great session, and I'm much looking forward to looking at anything that you guys put together in the future. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Heather. Thanks.
Thank you.
Take
Bye.
care.